All right, we've got 1 minute. Let's grab those. Okay, yes, all right. Oh, you're good, Jill, I think. Okay. Here's got one. And if anybody needs any continuous and non-conformity forms, they're right here. Thank you. Okay, we're going to begin the meeting now. Would you like to kick us off, Ms. Helen? We do. We have 3 active Planning Commission members as Scott Cross's term has expired.
Okay.
So having 2 of the 3 here, we now have a quorum.
Okay. Okay, it's 4 o'clock. This meeting comes to order at 4 o'clock. A roll call of the members. Tommy McDaniel,
Here.
Ruth Munstein,
Here.
Courtney Schubert, absent. We have a quorum.
Yes, sir.
Would you like to recognize the guests?
Yeah, let's. Yeah. You guys will need to vote to make Blue the chairman for this meeting,
Okay.
and so
Okay.
we'll need a motion and a second for
All
a
right,
vote
so-
to make Blue the chairman of this
Okay,
meeting.
I move to make Blue the chairman of this meeting.
All right, well, I guess I second it then.
All right, now Blue McDaniels will be facilitating this meeting.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Recognition of guests. So I see a large group of guests sitting here, and a lot of you, we sat in meetings 11 years ago when we started this journey. And we've all been through, a lot of us have been through a lot of trials and tribulations in this path through court cases and lawsuits and raising money and many trips to the Capitol. And for those people that were here throughout the entire journey, thank you all. For those people that are new starting here on this journey with us or just getting on board this journey, thank you all as well. It's been a long journey, and to be able to have the moment that we're going to have today to be able to get some rules and regulations in place is something that we've been looking for and working hard, and a goal of ours has been for a long time. So with that being said, recognition of any guests that are here. Is there anyone that I need to recognize, any special guests that are here?
I think we're good as far as we move forward. We do have the Hochatown Board of Trustees here in attendance, so if anyone has any questions for the board with regards to this, I encourage you to pull them aside and they'll gladly have a conversation with you. I'm looking forward to this open discussion as we proceed to our public hearing.
Item number 4 is public hearing regarding the proposed Town of Hochatown Comprehensive Plan. Is there anything in here for discussion on that other than we just need to look at it?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
Jill Frenick from
Yes.
TSW will facilitate our discussion
All
as
right.
we move forward to our public hearing.
Pardon me, I wasn't
And
expecting that.
everybody, this is Jill. Jill is with TSW. TSW is the professional planning firm that the town has hired to help build out our zoning regulations, take a look at our code of ordinances as well, our subdivision regulations, and help provide some feedback on our road design standards as well. And they're also the firm that's responsible for developing and helping us write the first ever comprehensive plan for the town of Hochatown.
Thank you very much, Adam. My name's Jill Ferentz. As he said, I'm with TSW. We have a Tulsa office. I'm a community planner, but our company does planning, architecture, landscape architecture. And then we have 2 folks from our team that are joining virtually, so you'll hear from one of our team members in just a moment. Christopher Myers on the zoning item, the following item. But tonight I have a quick presentation to basically give you an overview of the comprehensive plan, and basically all of the elements that are included in this draft. And so, as Blue mentioned, it's an exciting time for Hochatown. I'm incredibly impressed with what you've already accomplished as a community. It has so much potential, and you have the opportunity now to chart the future vision of this community. So it's a very exciting time. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And so what I'll cover with you today is the purpose of a comprehensive plan. What is it? Why it's important? The process of like what led to where we are today, and what are the next steps with that? And also the key elements that are included in the comprehensive plan that's being voted on this evening. So what is a comprehensive plan? It is a long-term guiding document for a community. So these documents are typically 20 years in horizon. So they are long range, and they provide a growth track for development in a community. It's your guidepost, it's your North Star. And so it covers, where are we now as a community? What is the pulse of the community now? What's the community snapshot? What makes up our demographics? Where do we want to grow as a community? So each comprehensive plan is different based on the community, based upon the residents and input that you have, and what your desires are. And then lastly is how do we want to get there? Whether it be for future development or goals that you might have for housing in the community or transportation improvements. It's called a comprehensive plan because it's intended to include all those pieces that are woven together to create a community, and especially all those things that the town has control to influence in the future. And on the right, it's really just a depiction of, sorry, it's kind of covered with our team's link here, but it's intended to cover, the comprehensive plan is intended to be that guidepost, like I mentioned, that North Star, that can help inform so many things that go into the town planning and operations process. So just for example, like zoning and ordinances, the next item on the agenda, the comprehensive plan is intended to be a guide to help inform those regulations. It can be also a tool for determining what your capital improvements should be in the next 5 years, and maybe what your budget should look like as you look over the next several years, and also your implementation strategy, your day-to-day processing as a town. And then on the flip side of that, just to look at it from another perspective, because town planning is not something you do every day. It's new. It's a new concept, especially for a new community. One way to look at it is really to define what it's not, just to clarify that. And comprehensive plans are not regulatory documents. They are not law. They are guides. So that's important to keep in mind. And they don't force changes on anyone's property. So, like for instance, if you have a use that's on your property now, it doesn't change any of that. It's not a legal law. It's a guidepost. And then it also is high level because it's comprehensive in nature. It doesn't get into the minute details or like the weeds, as you might say. And this one's a little bit wordy, but I think it's a helpful one. Why is it important to establish a plan now? So, as we mentioned earlier, especially as a new community, it's been in the works, over 11 years, as you mentioned, Blue, but a lot has been accomplished already, and you need something that's a comprehensive plan to guide those next steps, something that's been through the community process and is in line with the vision. So, you don't know where you're going if you don't have a plan. So, this is the starting point to set the framework for the future and provide some predictability in future development. And two is, Hochatown is a growing tourism destination, as we know. So with that comes some major opportunities and major challenges. So managing growth, looking at opportunities for infrastructure planning, those are really important areas that need to be tackled in this process. And thirdly, this plan that's on the agenda tonight is considered a first phase of the comprehensive plan. This plan helps guide the future growth while the full comprehensive plan is under development this year. So I'm trying to move this out of the way so you can see. So the first phase, the draft that's on the docket tonight for consideration is focusing on managing growth and development and support for transportation and infrastructure planning to provide a framework for development regulations. So as we mentioned earlier, the on the agenda is really that next step at looking at development regulations, the zoning ordinance. So you need this guiding document in place before that's established. And so this comprehensive plan, it's shorter than most that you would see, and it's because it's intended to provide that framework to support the development regulations. Meanwhile, as you'll see on the second phase here, we are hired to do a full comprehensive plan process. So diving into housing and neighborhoods, looking at opportunities there and recommendations, economic development, sustainability, environmental protections, really looking at it from all those perspectives, which takes time. From start to finish, it's typically about 1 year. But I know the town board and the community was really wanting to move forward on regulations so that you have that predictability as landowners, as investors here, to know and have assurance on what can happen on the properties around you, and to provide you guidance on regulations at the same time. So just know that this is a shorter version, intended to provide that framework, and then the full phase of the comprehensive plan is underway. We actually have, and at the end of the presentation, I believe I have a QR code to the project website that has more information, but we have an event here tomorrow night for the comprehensive plan, and I'll tell you a little bit more about, because we're really trying to get as much input as because we are going forward tonight with this comprehensive plan that provides this framework. If we find that, for instance, the future land use map that's in this document, if we find through a full public outreach effort, all the surveys and things that we're doing to reach the community, that it needs to be updated, like the plan that's in place or that's going forward today to planning commission to vote on, if it needs to be updated in the future, we're going to have the opportunity to do that this year, because that's what we're going to be focusing on with you as the town. So the next several slides just cover the plan, like what are the key plan elements that are included here. So on the right, on the left, you'll see the title page of the document. On the right is the contents. So the meat of it, you have your introduction, but it goes into the future land use and development, and then the transportation section. And one big clarification for any community, because again, this is not a subject that comes up a lot on daily conversations, is zoning versus land use. You know, what is the difference? So just to clarify that, is zoning is what is legally allowed on a property. It establishes a legal framework for what can be done on a property. The comprehensive plan is not zoning. So the future land use map is in the comprehensive plan, and it establishes a long-term vision to help inform regulations, like for instance the zoning ordinance that's coming up as the next item. So the plan doesn't establish zoning, but it provides a guide for that future growth. And so in the comprehensive plan, a key element is the future land use map. So it essentially looks at the current use of property in town, and these different colors signify different land use descriptions. And so the land uses that you see here, as you can see, the majority are, as you can see that here, that's the housing, the pink, the light pink. So that includes short-term rentals, but it also includes just your regular residential neighborhoods or residences in town. And so in blue you have mixed-use centers. So that could include residential or commercial. And then in this pink color, that's primarily along the highway, those are commerce and services. And so that could include like a commercial, for instance, what could be complementary in those areas would be a commercial zoning district or a mixed use type of zoning district in the future. And then in green you have rural and agriculture, and then purple, which this parcel here is the only one identified, is employment and industry. And essentially, as you can kind of see the pattern through here, it takes into account future land use is the first thing. And second is looking at focusing growth in key areas in the community where you have your higher traffic counts, especially on the highway, or potential opportunities where you might have larger tracts of land that could provide like a neighborhood commercial center that would be complementary to a residential area that's already established around it. main component to that section. And then there's also transportation and mobility. And so I just have these listed here because I'm going to show these maps to you just to show some of the existing conditions and looking at information that we have already on the town. So the annual average daily traffic map, the crash data maps, and the ODOT project location map. So it shows this data comes from ODOT, so it's focused more on the highway corridors. So on the south end of town, it's averaging about 7,900 vehicles per day along the south end of Highway 259. And then more central is just over 9,000 vehicles. And this is average. I'm sure it's not taken on weekend or spring break.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe we need to measure on those those days.
Yeah, we should get some counts for this year.
And then 259A is at 1,300, and these are 2023 numbers.
Right, before the casino was opened.
Good point. Good point. And then the next map shows crash data from ODOT between 2000 and 2022. This is over a 20-year period, so there are a number of dots shown here, but sometimes it can help to show patterns of accidents, areas that need to be focused, and have probably no surprises in some areas, but the red triangle are fatalities, and so you do see those are on the top layer of this map to highlight those, and then injury are in blue, and property damage are in green. And so showing primarily along 259, but you can kind of see some heavier clusters of accidents around certain areas as well that are injury related.
What's the, how long is this data? Where's it go back to?
2000 to 2022.
2000. Thanks.
And also just to share, and this is probably something that y'all are familiar with or have heard about, the ODOT project. And so this map helps to just show the extent of those improvements, the project location area, where the stoplights are proposed, as well as a multi-use trail project on the east side, and then sidewalk along portions of the west side, and also, of course, the expansion work, and then street light location area is shown in red. So this is, just know this is coming. This affects, of course, development in the future. It hopefully addresses some of the challenges that you're having and that you're experiencing with some of the growth pressures and the tourism and the surges that you have. So in this section, we also talk about the importance of establishing design standards. As a newly incorporated community, there are no design standards right now. And so when you look around and kind of wonder why you see certain roads looking the way that they do, or it's more likely than not that they're privately owned. That could be a potential, and sometimes it's a challenge to have those maintained. But as we go forward, that's what this is all about, is what are the next steps to help improve the future as we start to establish new streets. What should those standards be? And so I know one of the projects I think Town Board and the Adams working on is working with Garver Engineering to establish road design standards, and I believe that's underway currently.
Yep.
Okay. So we do have, we've referenced that in the plan, and then also shown just an example driveway detail. Because that's something that we've heard from the town is something that we need a standard detail for driveways so that stormwater is not blocked, it doesn't create erosion issues, and it's something that can be, doesn't create a hazard. So that's also something that's recommended in the plan. And this is an example from the city of Oklahoma City, but this would be a great example. I think that would be something that Hochatown could use.
We're very close to the finalization of the road design standards.
Okay.
We're waiting for some additional comments back from Garver Engineering.
Okay,
And we
great.
should be rehearing them again on April 2nd.
Next week. That's good. Thank you. And also another major component to this plan, similar to the future land use map as a guidepost, this thoroughfare plan is also looking into the future of, here are the street networks you have now. What are ones that should be major connector roads that maybe right now are just built maybe as standard streets or standard roads in the community, but which ones should we strategically look at as potential collectors and focus resources on? And so one of the primary objectives of thoroughfare plans is to inform the standards and classifications for roadways that Hochatown and future development should adhere to when planning and implementing growth. And so when I mentioned standards earlier, this comprehensive plan should relate to those standards, where if this is shown as a collector here in the comprehensive plan, the town should be looking at adopting design standards that say what the standard is for a collector. And it's going to be a higher standard than your local street because you're going to have higher traffic volume. You want to make sure emergency services can get there.
Evacuation routes as
Evacuation
well out of
routes.
the community in case of any natural disaster
Exactly.
or any disaster in general.
And so this highlights, of course, the principal arterial through the community, the highway, but also these roads here that are highlighted in purple, those are marked as major collectors for those reasons that we just mentioned. Making sure that there's, you have evacuation routes, alternative ways to get to, if there is an emergency, here, okay, what if this one's blocked off? Can you get around this way? Thinking through all those alternatives to make sure that you have a safe community. Also, there's a bike and pedestrian plan map, and so, this slide here talks about the importance of that. Of course, from a quality of life perspective, that's probably why you live in this area. The nature aspect, enjoying the beauty that you have here naturally, and being out in the open air, enjoying a walk or a bicycle ride would be something that really fits in line with the character of Hochatown and also the trails that are already closer to the lake. And so this map, it does highlight especially those corridors that have a higher traffic where it could connect to neighborhood areas, kind of those collector roads, are shown as potential connections in the future for either bicycle or pedestrian connections. And then also looking at creek connections too. So looking at opportunities next to the creek to take advantage of that natural beauty, provide opportunities to go walking in a public place close to your town, within your town limits, and then also connecting to those area amenities that already exist close to the lake. And so expanding upon and providing some more options here in town and those connections. This here. I will not cover the QR code in just a second. I will move that. So that's a summary of the plan elements that are included in the plan this evening. So what happens next? So this item is on the agenda for essentially a recommendation for consideration by the Planning Commission tonight. If it's recommended for approval, it would go to the Town Board of Trustees meeting next week on April 2nd at 1. And then also this plan guides future decisions but remains flexible. So we just want to keep that in mind. If the comprehensive plan ever changes in the future, it will go through another public hearing process just like this, but that is possible. It's intended to make sure that the comprehensive plan reflects the goals of the community, and those change sometimes, and sometimes you don't think of every possible scenario. So it can be flexible. It just needs to go through these channels to make any changes in the future. And then continued community involvement is key. And so earlier I mentioned that we have an event coming up tomorrow night, and so here's the basic details of that. The comprehensive plan kickoff open house. And so this is essentially the second phase where we're diving into all the different elements, the housing, infrastructure, looking at economic development, but we need to hear more from the community. So there's surveys, and then tomorrow evening we'll have more information about the comprehensive plan process. And then we'll have engagement opportunities where we can hear from you on what your priorities are, visual preference survey where you can see images of, because sometimes images speak 1,000 words, I think is what they say. So we'll have images where you can vote on the styles of development you like and other things in the community that you feel like are needed. So we would love for you to come tomorrow. It's a come and go style event. It's from 5:30 to 7:30 here in this room. And then also the project website, which I will move that so you can get to it. But we do have a project website, and that's where you can also fill out a survey. The survey will be live tomorrow. So if you go click the survey today, it's not quite live, but it will be tomorrow. And there's also a map survey where you can, an interactive map where you can zoom in, look at specific parts of town and provide your feedback, whether it might be a transportation concern or if you see opportunities for growth and development. So the CQR code, please save that if you can and come tomorrow. The next item on the agenda is the zoning ordinance. We have had a handful of protests submitted that we will go over those in the next agenda item. But what I'd recommend is if the planning commission recommends approval, that you would recommend approval contingent upon any changes that are made to the zoning map, that they would also be reflected on the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
Because essentially the future land use map is very similar to the zoning map. So if the zoning map is altered, we want to make sure those match when it goes to the Board of Trustees. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Well, I have a question it's probably Adam that needs to answer it. We were expecting a information and exhibit from Garver. Do we have that?
From Garver for the roads,
No, for the plan,
Standard?
part of the comprehensive plan.
for what section?
Yeah, there's a road design standards. I think if you
Yeah.
go to the website, it'll be there.
It's right, it's,
Oh, that's one, yeah.
Okay.
So basically, road
so
design
if,
standards.
if we don't have these, before we send it to the board, I would like to just remove those,
Redact them.
redact those
They're
for,
not
for
prepared.
now.
Yes, they're not prepared at this time.
Right,
We'll have them solidified in April. They're not even passed yet by the board.
right.
So they're not ready to move forward in this process.
Okay, so we'll take, the Garver portion out of the document for the purposes of moving this plan forward. I move that we do that.
I'll second that.
Motion in a second.
We're motioning to
Yeah,
approve.
we're in the public hearing part still, so probably no motions till we move to the next agenda item. So remember what you said, but we'll do it on the next agenda item.
I've got you.
Because right now we need to complete the public hearing portion and
Oh,
then
okay.
move to the motion part. So just
Okay.
hold on to what you said so we can make sure we
Okay, no
wrap
problem.
up the public hearing portion first. Thank you guys.
Okay, so I guess we're opening it up to the audience.
Unless Jill's got anything further.
No, I'm happy to answer questions.
And this public hearing is just on the comprehensive plan portion. There'll be a separate public hearing after the vote on the comprehensive plan for the zoning. So at this time, we would take anyone, and you'll raise your hand and call on you, take your name, just with respect to comprehensive plan, not zoning at this time.
Seeing none.
None?
None?
All right, we'll move forward then with item number 5, which is discussion, consideration, possible action, approval, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement regarding the proposed Town of Hochatown Comprehensive Plan. Ruth, would you state that you want to approve it? then,
Okay,
and with your condition on
I
it?
move that we approve the comprehensive plan with the removal, redaction of the references to information that Garver will be providing in the future.
And then I think we also need to include in that, Jill, subject to any zoning changes that also need to be
Okay,
reflected.
and
So-
subject to zoning changes.
Is that all? I'll
Yeah.
second that motion.
All right.
And roll call,
Roll call vote. Tommy McDaniel.
approve.
Ruth
The motion?
Johnson,
Approve.
Courtney Schubert is absent. That motion carries.
Next item on the agenda is a public hearing regarding new zoning ordinance.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to introduce Christopher Myers. He's our code specialist who's joining virtually. So we'll make sure everything's working before we get started here. Christopher, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Great,
Okay.
take it away, thank you.
Yes, Jill, I'll ask for your help. If there are questions, it might be hard for me to hear some folks further away from the laptop. If you'll just help field the questions.
Will do.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out today. My name is Christopher Myers. I'm a code writer with TSW. Very excited to share the draft zoning ordinance and draft zoning map that's been prepared so far. So my goals today are to introduce the concept, talk about some of the recent changes, and then also go through some of the forms that the town of Hochatown has received here recently. I'm going to start with the zoning ordinance. Just by way of introduction, zoning as a tool can help set the playbook, set the table for future investments in a community. And so the goal that we were charged with was creating, oh, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, Christopher.
We're trying to see if we can make your screen share bigger. Is there a way to just share your document and not your whole screen? Maybe that might help? Or you might just be sharing the document.
As in just like Zoom. Okay, is that working okay?
We're great.
Okay, great. Okay, so just by way of introduction, zoning is a tool that's meant to set the table. And so our firm was charged with creating a set of rules tailored to Hochatown. We looked at the investments on the ground, and we came up with this set of rules to help protect the investments that you have on the ground right now, and also set the table for future investments. This is all aligned with the draft comprehensive plan that Jill shared just a moment ago. And so I just want to emphasize the goal of this, of the zoning rules, is not to stop any businesses, stop property owners from enjoying their property. It's more so to protect the investments that are already in place and to set clear expectations for how everybody around you, your neighbors, how they're going to operate or not on their properties. So I'm going to, there's a lot of content. I'm going to introduce all the chapters, but feel free to ask questions as we go. So we start at the beginning here. You're looking at the full draft code. At the beginning, we're talking about the general rules of how the ordinance is set up. We talk about how things are measured. We talk about how the zoning ordinance affects other rules, other ordinances that the town of Hochatown has adopted. We move into districts, and so there are 6 districts that are proposed: the agriculture district, residential district, commercial, mixed use, industrial, and then Choctaw Trust. And so in a moment, I'm going to talk about what each of those districts mean as far as uses, but generally the rules of the ordinance are centered around those 6. So in this chapter, use provisions, this is where we talk about all the different uses that are or are not allowed across those 6 districts. This table is going to be the key tool if you're a current property owner, or if maybe you're looking at potentially owning property in Hochatown. This table would be the place you would go to understand what uses would be allowed, or if I want to change a use, what can I change my property's use to? So agriculture is focused on animal agriculture, food production uses. Residential district, RS, is focused primarily on residences and short-term rentals. Commercial is focused on the more intensive retail establishments, recreational uses, things of that nature. Mixed use combines some aspects of residential and commercial, so you can have a mixture of the two. The industrial or IB district is focused on your heaviest automotive and commercial uses. And then Choctaw Trust is meant to set aside the land that's within the town of Hochatown, but under the jurisdiction of Choctaw Nation. So this table is organized by 3 different use permissions. The filled circle is showing uses that are allowed through approval of a zoning permit. The open circle is showing uses that are allowed through approval of a special exception. So that means there's a public hearing before someone could implement the use. And then the hyphen means that a use is prohibited. I'll pause there and say, regardless of what the zoning ordinance would allow or not, every use that's happening right now in Hochatown would be considered legally established. And so what that means is the use could continue indefinitely. Compliance with the ordinance would only come into place if a property owner were to make changes to the use. So let's say hypothetically you're operating an iron smelting plant on your property right now. It's legally established, subject to any rules, laws that you had in place to set it up. It's there. But now zoning is coming in and saying, okay, iron smelting is not going to be allowed anymore on that property. You could still continue to smelt iron for as long as you want, but compliance would only happen should you decide you wanted to expand that use. You wanted to add another building, build an addition, you wanted to increase the size and scale of the operation. That's where zoning would prevent those kinds of changes. It would also, of course, prevent any new iron smelting operations from coming in. So broadly, as you look at the properties and the uses around Hochatown, nothing's going to change immediately from the zoning ordinance. It's really going to shape the next set of investments that someone might make in their properties.
Okay,
so after
Christopher, can I put in my 2 cents on something?
Please.
On the veterinary facility, I would like to see a unfilled circle under commercial. I think there are some circumstances where having a veterinary facility in a commercial area, particularly a small animal facility, might be appropriate.
Understood.
Thank you.
Okay. And you know what? If you'd like, we can go through more uses as well. I don't know if anybody else has had a chance. I'll continue introducing the rest of the code, but as we're going through, feel free to share any other comments, questions, concerns.
Thank you.
So the next chapter after the use provisions is the dimensional development standards. I should say what's proposed for Hochatown as far as the content of your zoning ordinance is fairly unique. There are a lot of zoning ordinances you might see for neighboring communities, particularly larger communities, that get in the weeds on a lot of provisions. You might find that this draft zoning ordinance is really focused on 3 things. The use of the land, where buildings can be placed, and nonconformities. Really just those 3 things as a way of trying to set a solid foundation for investments. So you'll also, if you were to compare this zoning ordinance to others, you might think, oh, this ordinance is very short, or it's not covering as much as some of the other ordinances. That's intentional because this is tailored to those more critical uses, features, and needs that Hochatown is facing. So, case in point would be this dimensional standards table. It's really just talking about setback requirements and the heights of structures on properties. But here in this section, you'll find what those dimensional requirements are.
Okay, I have some issues here now. I'm not sure why multi-use is only 5 feet. I think that might be in error. It probably should be the same as residential and commercial.
Okay.
So it should be 25 feet. Also, 55 feet, which would be basically a 5-story building, would be very appropriate for multi-use, but we could also have a hotel or an apartment building in the commercial section. So I think that should probably be 55.
Okay.
Hey, Christopher, what about if we had an opportunity for folks, if they needed to surpass like the 35-foot maximum height, what if we did a public hearing that would be required, or some sort of a request for variance process that the applicant could go through? So that way, it's, you're not automatically just granting the maximum height, but you're still giving an opportunity for some flexibility if the use, matches the Hochatown standard.
Sure, you could do that with both the commercial and the multi-use if you wanted to, because then, it's, if you're building a hotel or an apartment building, an extra step isn't gonna be that big a deal, and we might not want a 5-story hotel
Right.
in certain places.
And so that would not be granted in that situation.
Right. And I would think even in multi-use that might be an appropriate.
Sure, there's at least a couple of options. I think I'm hearing maybe taking the multi-use maximum height down to 35 feet. But to go back to the question you were raising, that's a great segue to Chapter 6, Administration and Procedures. So that talks about how a property owner would seek permission or seek a variance from the rules to be applied to their property. So I'll focus on the variance process here for just a moment.
Okay.
Variances are based on giving property owners a relief from a hardship. Maybe there's something unique about the property, maybe the topography, maybe the layout, the shape of it, some of the features surrounding it, maybe even access easements that cut through it. There's some feature that creates a hardship where it's practically difficult for them to comply with the ordinance. That's one of the tests that's required for the Zoning Board of Adjustment to make their decision. So here we have the criteria on screen. Can everybody see my screen okay? I should have asked it already.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, so this approval criteria is really the set of criteria required in order to meet that threshold. Basically, there needs to be a very unique and compelling reason why the rule that applies across Hochatown should not apply to a particular property. We wouldn't recommend basing that on one particular use or maybe one desired development. It really should be applied uniformly across the whole district. And so the variance process is really that relief mechanism for unique situations. So all that to say, even with the dimensional standards that we shared earlier, there are ways for folks to seek relief, and the variance process would be one of those important ways to do that. Should that height limitation or the setback requirements make their property difficult to develop?
Thank you, Christopher.
Does that address your question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. So the rest of Chapter 6 is talking about those processes, and just to introduce it, here you have the decision matrix and requirements, and so it talks about, on the left-hand side, the different application types, who is reviewing and making recommendation on an application, who has the final decision, and then, especially for public hearings, what kind of notices you as a property owner should expect to receive if it's a property that's so this table lays that out, and then the rest of the chapter talks about each process. You'll also see here the process for making amendments to the content of the zoning ordinance and the content of the map. That's a legislative process that ultimately falls to the Board of Trustees to make final decisions on. So we'll see all that laid out here. The last section is definitions, so that just makes sure we're all talking about the same thing. You'll find that in addition to other terms, every single use that's listed in Chapter 3 is defined here for ease of use. So that gets us top to bottom through the full draft zoning ordinance, and I'm happy to dig into the uses, but I guess I'll pause there. Are there any questions, thoughts, concerns at this point?
Okay, I have a definition I want you to add.
Yeah.
And this goes to, it's in Chapter 4, but there's a reference to stub walkways and stub driveways. Now from context, I've come to understand that what we're talking about is a walkway or driveway that intersects or runs into an adjacent property as opposed to running into a road. Is that correct?
Yes.
However, when I first read that, I went to Google to look it up, and Google told me that a stub driveway or walkway is one that is all messed up. It's uneven and broken. So we need to have our definition specifically clear in this document.
So we'll, if adding those definitions becomes part of your recommendation, we'll make sure to incorporate that into the draft here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's. Let's talk through the use permissions, and then I'll get to the zoning map. So we've talked a little bit about principal agriculture and animal uses, and so you can see on screen how those are organized. Also on screen are the principal automotive uses, so think of your drive-throughs, your fuel, your gas stations, service garages, parking lots, and parking structures. Are there any concerns over those groups of use permissions that anyone has? Seeing none, I'll keep moving on. Principal commercial and office uses and principal industrial uses. Again, each of these uses are defined in Chapter 7, but you'll see personal services is focused on things like barbershops. Just as an example, office use could be professional offices. Commercial retail sales has a wide range of uses, but basically any place where you're taking something off the shelf home. And then in the industrial uses, there aren't a whole lot, but they're broadly categorized into heavy or light industrial uses. There's also provision or definitions for resource extraction, so think quarries, storage, and wholesale retail. Any concerns over these groups of use permissions? Principal institutional uses, so your arts and cultural establishments, cemeteries, government, medical care, religious places of worship, schools, and transportation services. So those are organized across a few. The commercial district allows pretty much all of these. Mixed use, scale some of that back. Industrial allows for some. Very limited allowances in the residential and agriculture districts. Any concerns over that group? And my reason for sharing this is I think it will help inform the discussion when we talk about how these are all laid out on the zoning map. So I'm hoping that my goal is to help visualize all of those groups of uses. All right, and our last few groups would be lodging, residential, and accessory uses. So lodging, primarily your short-term rentals, but you can also think hotel and motel, bed and breakfast. Short-term rentals, of course, are allowed almost across the board, except for in the industrial district. Your residential uses, so broadly broken into three categories: one unit, 2 unit, and multi-unit. You'll see those organized mostly around the residential and the mixed-use districts. Household care facilities, life care facilities, and again, those are defined in Chapter 7. But think about the things like assisted care units. Those are included in those definitions. And then accessory uses is meant to call out some specific uses that might have some infrastructure needs. So think of your automotive charging as an accessory use. Home occupations, that's one that I'm going to focus on here in just a moment. Outdoor storage, accessory to some other use. Accessory parking lots. So across those categories, are there any concerns that anyone has identified?
Yes, Christopher, this is Adam. I'd like to kind of have a general discussion or point out that we don't have any placement for RV parks. And we've had a couple of property owners that called up Town Hall and expressed interest in potential RV parks, and that was not located on the list. So I was wondering where we could find placement for potential RV parks.
Yeah, so RV parks are included in the definition of mobile home parks.
That won't work.
Yeah, that's on the front, that is that
It's,
So could we possibly pull that apart and separate that from a mobile home park standard? Would we add that to a potential, that could be a potential review for a type of zoning designation?
Let me read that. I'm sorry.
It could fit under principal lodging with our other lodging accommodations like bed and breakfast,
I see.
boarding, etc. Because it's not your primary set of residence, right? It's temporary parking an RV.
So for clarification, yes, we can pull out and basically create a definition, carving RV parks out of mobile home park. As far as the use permissions, is that something that you would want to allow via zoning permit in the agriculture, residential, commercial, and mixed use districts?
I wouldn't in the residential, I would in the commercial and mixed use.
Yeah, I think commercial for sure, and then mixed use permitted upon review, possibly, if this planning commission is comfortable with that.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
So one more time, allow by zoning permit in the commercial district and then
Correct.
by special exception in the mixed use?
Yes.
And also in ag, right?
Permitted upon review by ag, in
Yeah.
case it doesn't entirely fit. It's something that could possibly threaten or damage neighboring properties.
True.
So in the ag and MU, and so that use would be prohibited then in the residential, industrial, and Choctaw.
No, the Choctaws, I think, probably may want to put a
Well, we wouldn't
RV
have-
park.
we wouldn't
Yeah, we
have-
don't control them
we
anyway.
don't have authorization over that.
Okay,
No
all right,
jurisdiction.
so prohibited in the RS and ID and CT, CT districts. Okay, that's straightforward, and
You'll
we'll
need
also
to-
make mentions.
Christopher, you'll need to remove the CT district at the end of that last sentence.
No, he's got it allowed by special exception.
Oh, for this, would it be, okay, I know it's a little, how should I say? We would still recommend defining a permission for Choctaw in case, in the future, land is sold out of their jurisdiction.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Yeah.
So-
That's great. Thank you for thinking of that.
So would you want it to be considered, allowed, special exception, or prohibited?
Yeah, it would be allowed at that point in time if that's something that they need to do.
Okay, understood.
Is this land that's
and
sold, it's brought out of trust land, or,
Yeah.
Yeah,
because it would
no,
require a
this-
standardized zoning after it gets out of CT land?
Well, there would be, so, I guess the first note is, just by way of selling, property out of Choctaw, jurisdiction, that alone wouldn't cause the zoning to change.
Okay.
But you might, at that point, encourage the private property owner to then go through a rezoning process to some other designation. They wouldn't necessarily have to though. And that's one of the reasons why we recommend still having a set of permissions for that
Right,
district.
okay, then set it under a review process.
Gotcha.
And make sure that's an RV park definition.
Yeah.
Yes.
Got it.
Thank you.
Oh yes, thank you, RV Park. Yes. Okay, we can handle that. No problem.
Are we able to ask
Um,
you a-
Yes,
So we do have here in Hochatown a couple of RV parks where people have that as they live in an RV full time.
Mhm.
So wouldn't that go under both principal lodging and principal residence? Because they have that as their principal residence, that's where their voter registration is, that is their principal home.
Christopher,
And they are
could you hear
parks.
that question, Christopher?
Yes, I could.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, as of right now, the distinction between whether it's in lodging or under residential, that doesn't directly impact the use permissions. I think maybe where we need to clarify is, I wonder if some of the existing RV parks are in areas proposed to be designated as a residential district. So how does the planning commission, how does the community feel about allowing RV parks in the residential district by special exception?
I just want to say that the people that live in ours, that supposedly live there full time, they're on a month-to-month basis. And
Yeah.
every one of them have eventually left, that maybe and we don't even have a mailbox except for a VA guy that's moving to Florida now, so even though they are called full-time living, most of them eventually move on because they were workers.
So, did you get that, Christopher?
Yeah.
Okay,
yes,
good. So, taking that, I think to answer your question, you've asked if we should put it under a use permit upon review for the residential section. I think we should, I wouldn't mind it being a use permit upon review, so that way it's not automatically warranted. But if it's not congruent with the area, then it can still be not approved. But you do have it already for RVs to be approved for the commercial district as it is. And from my understanding, Robin, you guys are currently zoned commercial right now as it is, right?
I don't know, I can't tell by the map.
Your map, it's pretty
It
small,
looks
isn't
like
it?
I'm not, but I don't know.
Actually, I think you guys may have been residential off of Pinion over there on the west side. I think we pointed out this property, or I pointed it out whenever to the map, but as Christopher had said, it's not going to affect your operations of your business as it currently stands. We've got the non-conforming, the continuance of non-conformance.
And I guess kind of related, but I also want to talk about home occupation before we move on to the map. But so just to clarify then, is the community still fine then, and the planning commission okay with this as described? So prohibiting RV parks in the RS, in the residential and industrial districts. Does that capture the desire for now?
I think
We
we
just
said,
talked about-
yeah, I think we said that we would, in the residential district, make it provisional.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify.
Is that where we are?
Okay. And you know what? Maybe it's worthwhile to take a look. So special exception. Let's see the decision bodies. So special exception goes through a recommendation process by the town administrator, and then the final decision goes to the zoning board of adjustment. There is a published notice, so something that goes in a newspaper general circulation. There's also a mailed notice requirement that goes to properties within, I believe it's 300-foot radius? Yeah, 300-foot radius. So that criteria for a special exception would be the following 4 points. So the zoning board of adjustment would have to find that these four points as appropriate or as applicable describe the proposed use. It meets all applicable standards of the zoning ordinance, would not detract from the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan, be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained harmonious with the uses and structures in the general vicinity, and would not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. So those are the 4 criteria that your zoning board of adjustment would rely on when it's looking at a request for a special exception. So just in what we were describing, that doesn't mean it's outright allowed, outright prohibited. There's a public review process for a given use, and for certain uses, it provides a critical touch point for you as a neighbor to understand what's happening and to have a chance to weigh any concerns you might have over that development.
Chris?
Okay, so
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, I thought you were done, but continue, and I'll put in my 2 cents later.
Well, I was going to move on to home occupation. So this, this is a
Okay.
great customer.
All right, on the previous page, when it talks about publishing notice, I think we should add, that it should be, posted on the town website. Because not everybody reads the newspaper, and sometimes you can't even get a newspaper up here.
Understood. Okay, so when published notice is required,
Right.
you'd want to see that the town is committing to publishing it on the website.
I would say also social media, but that probably would happen almost automatically anyway. Pretty much anything that happens in Hochatown, it's about 4 different Hochatown pages.
So adding a requirement in this section of the code would apply the same deadlines. So published notice generally required not less than 10 calendar days before the public hearing. That same time frame would apply then to the requirement for posting on the town's website. Does that sound appropriate?
That sounds appropriate to me.
Okay. Okay, we've captured that. Any other notes?
No, I'm about out of notes.
Okay.
I have one. Under the industrial light.
Oh, okay.
Are you there?
Yes, you said the definition for
The
industrial
definition of
light.
industrial light, if you look at how it's referenced under the, it's ID, let's see, the red, commercial district, we have manufacturing, considered manufacturing, breweries, wineries, and distilleries here. Fixing that so that it is a circle of, not a dark circle, but a unfilled circle
In commercial?
in commercial, because we have those that exist in commercial.
Right.
So if anybody
Breweries
does
and
any
wineries and.
Any alterations to it, that we have the ability to bring that forward to the town council.
So did I understand that correctly? The industrial light use permission for the commercial district, you're wanting to see that allowed subject to special exception?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Good catch.
Okay. We captured that. Anything else at the moment? All right, let's talk a little bit about home occupations. The reason that I want to focus on this, we've heard concerns from a few Hochatown property owners who may be operating small businesses on their property, and they're concerned with a residential zoning designation affecting their ability to operate that business. So the home occupation section here, section 20-3-6, is intended to support, allow, encourage what you might consider residential scale occupations that are happening on and in dwellings. So you'll see a few requirements here. Residency requirement, home occupations are allowed on the same parcel as the operator's dwelling that serves as the primary residence. Limited employment. So this gets to the scale of the operation. Performance restrictions and traffic generation. So basically trying to allow operations that aren't acting like a bar or a retail shop, something where you've got a lot of traffic, a lot of trucks, or delivery vehicles, maybe a lot of noise and lighting. It's meant to support residential scale operations.
Kind of work from home stuff.
Exactly, that's one option, yeah. So if you haven't had a chance yet to take a look at that section and you're operating a business out of your home, we would ask for you to take a close look at section 20-3-6 and confirm if it's describing the kind of operation that maybe you have on your property or that you would be comfortable with a neighboring property owner operating. So with all of that said, I think we've talked a little bit deeper into the use permissions for each of the different categories of each of the different zoning districts. I want to talk about the draft zoning map. So first I'm going to kind of walk through how we organize this, and then I want to talk through some of the questions, forms that we've received, some of the discussion that's happened during the last couple of days. Okay, so our goal with this map was to take a look at how properties are operating on the ground right now, and giving some shape and form to the kinds of uses that would make sense on those properties. So you'll find broadly the commercial and mixed use districts are organized off of Highway 259 and other state routes, major roads, or at least larger roads in the community. Your residential districts cover the vast majority of Hochatown, and they include those uses we described earlier, all of the residential uses and STRs as well. Agriculture was focused on some of the larger lot areas that maybe are undeveloped. And then Choctaw Nation's jurisdiction that's within the corporate boundaries of Hochatown was also mapped in the CT district. So that's broadly how this map has been prepared. And I saw that it was posted online. You'll see the key down here showing the different zoning designations. So now what I'd like to do, I think it would be good to go through each of the different forms that we've seen and maybe talk through with the Planning Commission to see what other changes you might want to see to this draft map. Before I dig into that, did Adam leave the room? Is he still here?
No, Adam's not with us right this minute.
Okay. Okay, I was going to ask him a question. Well, let's go through some of the forms then. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We've got 11 forms, and the reason why I want to go through each of them is I want to make sure on the public record that folks who've submitted their comments are being heard, and then we want to check with the Planning Commission to understand which of these changes the Planning Commission would want to incorporate in their recommendation. Okay, so we'll start with this first request. It's not addressed. The plat is called Southern Sunrise Phase 2. There's a few lot numbers. And the area, the request is to change, I believe, from residential to mixed use. So you'll see me kind of keep flying around this map here. Right, okay, so it's these parcels here along Camp Ranch and Pine Hills Road. The request is to change from residential to commercial. So broadly, the commercial district, it allows a wide range of uses that we were describing earlier, things from general retail to bars to office space. And one of the reasons why you'll find most of those zones organized along Highway 259 is because of the infrastructure needs that tend to be associated with those kinds of uses. There's also generally noise associated with some of those uses. But think of the utilities, water, sewer, things that one day would come along 259. You'll find commercial organized around there. So this particular request we would not recommend because it's so far removed from some of the places where those utilities might come in. It's also surrounded by residential uses, and where maybe the request from this property owner is for one particular kind of commercial use, applying the commercial designation would allow any of those uses that are allowed by zoning permit to happen there. So that's one of the reasons why we would not recommend this particular request.
Do we know what they want to put there?
Let's see.
They just requested commercial designation. I don't think they specified. No, they didn't specify.
Yeah, without knowing what they wanna do.
What was shared with me by the applicant here in this situation, I spoke with Mr. Snyder on the phone. He had shared that he had some interest in doing some sort of a very small commercial, maybe like a light, like a winery type situation, gravel type situation with some picnic tables, outdoorsy with some lighting, maybe like a pickleball court. Have you spoken with him at all on that? Maybe what his concepts were? But he was wanting to do something that would service their subdivision, which is, he's the developer of the surrounding area. He wanted to provide some light entertainment opportunities for the folks back there, and that's as far as I know and can speak on that. I think.
Well, we could go multi-use on
Can
that.
that go in where it's reviewed before the council, for approval, whatever they want to do?
Christopher, how would you recommend we proceed forward with this to get a discussion before we grant this one or approve this one to move forward? How would you recommend we proceed? Should he do a rezone application later on down the line in the future, and we could review it as a board, as a planning commission? What are some thoughts on how you believe we should handle this, since we don't quite have a lockdown on what specific this use could be?
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess the first thing I would share is even if you knew specifically that they wanted to put a winery here, changing the zoning designation to commercial doesn't limit them to wineries, or doesn't limit future owners of this property to wineries.
Right.
So I would encourage the community to think about the range of uses allowed in that district and decide, is this an appropriate location for any of those uses?
Right.
With that said, and I don't know if you came in the room before or after I was discussing this, but it's so far removed from Highway 259 where you've got more infrastructure, more opportunity for infrastructure. That's one of the reasons we would not recommend this particular change at this time. But even with those things said, yes, there is a process built into the draft ordinance for someone to seek a rezoning.
Okay.
So they would have the opportunity to seek that, even if this change wasn't made right now.
So what if we had the developer repackage this as like a PUD development, so that way we have a specific outline on what the use is, and it's specified in that planned urban development? Do you think that would be more viable if someone wants to do something unique like this that would service a small subdivision?
Yes, there's not a specific provision for PUDs in the zoning ordinance. As far as laying out properties, that part of that might come through the subdivision regulations. But as far as use permissions, I think it would fall to which of the categories, which of the zoning districts maybe represents where the community wants this property to go. If I recall correctly, I think Camp Ranch Road, is that one of the roadways that Hochatown is seeking easements to maintain?
So it is currently a public road. It's a county-owned road that we have an interlocal agreement with the county in order to maintain the public roads. So we are looking to make improvements along Camp Ranch Road.
Okay, so the reason I bring that up is it's possible that maybe Camp Ranch becomes another thread of commercial uses in the future as Hochatown continues to evolve. Maybe now is not the time for that, but I think that property could be well placed for that. Should the community decide, particularly in this comprehensive plan, we want to see more commercial development along this route.
Okay. And what if alternatively to that, what if there was no interest by the community in doing commercial strip down Camp Ranch, What if that's not really something that the community's interested in? But what if later on down the road we created a PUD zoning designation, and then the applicant can come through and use that at that time, because PUDs, and we could draw them out and write them up in a manner that requires a business plan to be introduced to the planning commission, so that way there's a specified use and building expectations and regulations along with that, and it's very restricted to that specific type of development that's mentioned in their business plan. What do you think about that? Do you think that would be a good kind of trade for maybe, not right now, but later on in the future, we'll have a procedure for that, and that way we have guarantees that we're not gonna have some crazy commercial development. If you could just give me a negative example of like what a commercial development would be, right in the middle of a bunch of residents, STRs and potentially residential dwellings.
A paintball, facility.
But anyways, yeah, I
We
think.
went to the woods this year.
I think you kind of understand where I'm at, and I think that would be a really good opportunity for people if we created a PUD opportunity or PUD zoning designation later in the future.
Okay.
Adam, what is
Okay, Adam.
It's a planned urban development. And Christopher, would you kind of elaborate PUDs for the crowd here?
Sure, yeah. Planned unit developments, they're most frequently used for residential developments, but there are plenty of examples of commercial and mixed use planned unit developments. It's basically a way of giving property owners the ability to create a very unique plan. So it's something that maybe they can't accomplish through another zoning district. It really has a unique layout to it. Maybe there's unique features on the land that they want to organize around. So they want to cluster their lots, their buildings in a particular way that might not conform to regular zoning requirements. PUDs allow for basically master planning a site and getting that formally approved by the community.
So they would propose kind of a business plan, if you will, like a full-fledged write-up and site development plan, and an explanation of what the specific use is. So like if someone wanted to have like kind of like a self-serving community where you have like a little farmer's market and you have like condos, and so on the bottom you have some shopping spaces, but at the top you have spaces of dwelling. So you have that kind of mixed use approach, and it's something that's not typically allowed, like Christopher said, or regular zoning designations, but it's something that would fit in the area. So they would present that plan to the planning commission, and then if the planning commission approves or rejects it, if it's approved, then it would go before the board of trustees for final approval. So, it's an opportunity to do something different, but it's reviewed by the town, and there's a voting process behind whether or not that is congruent with the overall area and the goals and objectives of what this community looks like. So it's
then,
reviewed.
if that were to be approved, then that could be the only use for that.
Yep.
Versus commercial.
It's
like
anything,
monitoring now,
anything
and
commercial,
it could be
and if
whatever.
it's sold, then it's still anything commercial. Absolutely. So it really kind of allows someone to do something, but it also protects the area. So the whole point is that the planning commission and the board of trustees do the research and make sure that, again, this is synchronized with the overall area. The aesthetic, the feel, is this what we really want to allow here in this area? So, and then it's like a contractual agreement, essentially, really, of what you can and cannot do. With that. So I like PGs in some areas. I think they're a really great opportunity to bring unique situations. Like I really like the condo and farmers market situation, but is that a part of what Hochatown envisions? That's the big question. So, okay, I think we're good, Christopher, on this one. Unless you have any questions before we move forward through this one.
Sure. So just to clarify for the record, would the planning commission want to incorporate this particular change at this time?
No.
Sorry, 1 second here. Okay, the next one that we have. Okay, is 463 Chinook and the request is to change from the proposed residential district to mixed-use center. So there's a cluster of properties in this area requesting the same. So I'll just share really quick, and then we'll look at the map. Oh, I think I'm on the wrong one. Not that one. Similar request for 139 Chinook Road. 146 Chinook Road, and I think there's one more. One second. Okay, it might be those three.
275.
Right, so here we go. These are the collections of properties here that are requesting that change from residential to mixed use. So there is a collection of commercial zones along Stevens Gap Road here. The distinction here is that the properties of Chinook don't have direct access to Stevens Gap. So let me first say, and you heard me say this earlier, but I just want to stress, any uses that have been legally established can continue to operate no matter what the zoning ordinance says. They can continue to operate. The only challenge might be if that use would not be permitted by the zoning ordinance, and the property owner decides to make changes to that use. That's when they would need to come into compliance. So any investments on the ground right now aren't going to be impacted by zoning permission. It really just comes into play when there's a voluntary change, desired expansion, moving, or change of the use on those properties. So this series of requests changing from residential to mixed use, it's in a way it's similar to the previous situation that I was describing. You've got some properties that aren't fronting on one of these commercial corridors, so there might be a lack of infrastructure that's required. The mixed use designation allows for more uses than what some of these property owners might be wanting to see in the middle of residential areas.
So would that be, could you kind of go over some of that, and then maybe we can allow an opportunity for any of the property owners that are present to speak on the intended use?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so the mixed use designation, I guess I'll focus on the commercial uses. There's other uses that mixed use allows, but in the principal commercial and office uses, the mixed use district allows by zoning permit offices, personal services, and restaurants and bars. By special exception, it allows recreation and entertainment uses, indoor and outdoor. And then of course you've got the residential uses that are allowed in that district. So all that to say, there's a wide range of uses allowed in mixed use that would be allowed if that zoning designation was changed.
Okay.
Would that be a lot like what we were considering just prior for a mixed use?
In terms of
The Brad
do you
Schneider
mean-
request.
His was commercial.
His was commercial, even posted a commercial
Right.
use.
Yeah, so and the commercial I would say is heavier in terms of
Okay.
the intensity and mixed use.
So, would we like to, let's kind of get the floor, let's pull up one of the applications here, and then we'll ask if the property owners here in attendance, and we'll allow an opportunity to ask any questions, or
Yeah.
have a conversation. Okay, we've got Crystal Russell, do you have any questions or concerns?
Could you scroll up and not put my phone number out there perfectly? Thank you. Thank you. Yes, so, let's just talk about the fact that we already have a couple of businesses operating on our property. We are on Chinook Road. We come off of Orca, so Gutter Chaos is on Orca. We get a lot of traffic already. We have blacktop roads to the edge of Chinook coming around, kind of where you see that second property there and expansion coming around. So we have a campground, which we may want to change into short-term at some point. Which would make us have to change or come before the board again to try to get that. But we also, just across the street from us, there is a parcel of land that has 6 tiny homes being built on it with a resident. So theirs is being termed as residential. Ours is residential. It's business. We have a couple of offices coming at different parts. That long piece is 3 acres, and that's our entire property. So different parts of that property are different aspects of our business and our home. And then, I don't see our neighbors here. One of them actually lives in Arkansas. So 275, the one that's right next to us, they have some potential changes coming to theirs as well. They didn't know this was coming up this fast, and that could affect the sale of their property if they decided to sell or to change that from residential. And then I don't see Casey and them here, but they have the 2 at the top over there where the RS is, those 2 across the street from each other. They have an ag operation because they raise therapy ponies and use those for doing therapy. They also have their home, and then they have a shop that they operate out of. So in this capacity, UPS and FedEx and budget trucks, sanitation trucks, gravel trucks, all kinds of things. And when something's going on Stevens Gap Road, people run through that neighborhood, run through Chinook, down Greenling through Chinook and to Orca. So we are a high traffic area, and our people are pretty much used to that all the way around. And a large portion of that community has turned into short-term rentals because you've got Skyhorse right, you see where Skyhorse Drive is right there in that arrow. They have multi, and then around the corner, there's another tiny town home area. So we have high traffic. It may not show it on something else, but eventually there will be changes to that. And just, as a property owner, when we bought this property, it's not part of Choctaw Hills, so it had no covenants, no zoning restrictions. It is a large reason why we purchased that property where we purchased it. So we do try to protect the environment and the area in the way we do business, and we'd like the opportunity to continue that. But also, if we decide to sell, because selling can be one of those substantial changes, we want to make sure that that property is protected, because if you're going to sell and you have businesses on it, you want to ensure that that can move forward to the potential purchasers as well.
First, and thank you so much for sharing the forum and coming out tonight to talk about your property and the situation. One point I'll share, the sale of a business to a different operator wouldn't impact the legally established nature of it. It would really just be if there were changes to the operation itself. But who's operating it, the name of the entity, that change alone wouldn't cause a use to lose its grandfathered or legal non-conforming status. So with all of those comments shared, and you're seeing here on the map those collections of requested changes from residential to mixed use, I guess we would look to the Planning Commission to ask, what is your read on the use permissions in the mixed use district? would those be appropriate in these areas? And, you know, would you want to see these changes implemented as part of your review of this draft map?
Can we pull up the use permissions table for the group? Sure.
And so this column here, MU, is showing the mixed use. There's a few different sections, so I'm happy to scroll to, you know, whichever ones are of most interest. And I will also share, short-term rentals are allowed, or I should say, proposed to be allowed in the residential district, along with the mixed-use district.
Crystal, are you wanting to change from the glamping situation to possible builds on for like STR units? Is that what you
We've talked about two different things because the property that's just north of us at the end of our 3 acres has RVs that they've established, and they're kind of doing that as a full-time. We've talked about the possibility of changing where our camping grounds are into RVs, and it could be short-term or long-term. We are still in discussion about that and what it'll take to get that to take place, and or tiny homes. But we've got an office coming out of there as well because it's easy access, and then we have an office. No, it's an actual business office. It's not a home office because it's at the other end of the property. It's considered a commercial office.
Is it one parcel or are they separated parcels from the
It's one complete parcel.
Okay, so this is
Insurance wise though, they won't cover it with your homeowners. It's a separate entity. So, and then, you know, we have an office, we have 2 offices down on the end by our house. One in the large building and one in the, what most people would consider, I guess, more of a tiny house kind of thing, where we lived while we were building. So,
I think from our conversation earlier, whenever we discussed RV parks and how they were missing, we did ask that RV parks get added to residential upon review. So, if Ms. Jocelyn here keeps the residential zoning here, then there's still that option for her to pursue a business in RV parks with the use permitted upon review.
yeah, and I guess my concern with that is then I might be working on plans for that, and then because I don't have the authorization to do that with my own property, which is why I'm here today, then I have to jump through more hoops with the city, the planning commission, and that could substantially change plans that we've been in the works with for a while.
Yeah.
Because we haven't put our tents up yet because we're in those works already. And so that could substantially change our business plan that we already have prior to any of this going on.
Yeah. So the planning commission needs to review the use table here and identify in mixed use the usages that are allowed in the mixed use section here that Christopher has pulled up, and see if that's viable for uses in the parcel, because Ms. Jocelyn may have the business
Yeah,
opportunity.
if we approve it here,
Okay.
it still would have to go to a final approval by the board. And if there were any concerns that neighbors would have, they would have an opportunity to express those concerns.
About the having an issue with
Having an
the
issue with mixed use.
Okay.
Yep.
Would that be a potential to change that area to grant the request? And then, what's the time period for someone that would oppose that to make us opposition before the town board hears that?
When do we set to approve the zoning maps again, Christopher? Is it the April 2nd, or would it be
I looked to.
Liz is nodding yes.
That's on our April 2nd agenda.
Okay.
That there'll be a public hearing before the Board of Trustees on April 2nd where people can raise additional
Okay.
concerns at that time.
There you go.
And then vote on both of these items again.
Finish your answer.
What was that answer? I'm sorry.
There would be an opportunity
Okay.
for additional concerns. There's a public hearing on the April 2nd meeting when the Board of Trustees reviews this for final.
Where are you at there?
I feel like in some respects it's already mixed use.
Well, with several neighbors coming in, how many applicants were there? People?
I think there's 4.
4 in that area, so.
Yeah, it's a lot of.
And those are unique individuals, correct? Those are
Separate, yes.
separate
Those are all
individuals.
separate
Yes.
And right there.
applications.
I mean, it's a good chunk of
I'm not-
that part of
I would-
Chinook
I would
Road,
look at
so.
that. If there's
And
comment
it
for the
is
neighbors,
adjacent
just
to
let the
commercial.
council- Really, I'm just supporting you, yes, to give the council a decision to
Right.
defer to.
Yeah.
And then if any neighboring parties have concerns about potential uses for that designation, then they can bring it up during that public hearing.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I'm supporting.
Okay, so I'm make a note here for our, when we move.
Helen, would you like to hear anything from the planning commission on that specifically, or are you set with your notes, or?
Well, so are you guys just deferring to the April 2nd board meeting?
I think they're
Not
going
right
to,
here.
well, I'm gonna wait for them to make a motion. I think are you set to approve that, and then?
Approve
You,
what?
you wanna do,
Are there
do you
any more
want
to
us
hear
to do
from?
a move, to do approval on it?
Yeah, are there any more to hear from? They said a lot.
Let's see if we can call out, I think Casey Redding, Linda Fellers, anyone here?
They're not here, and Tiffany Henry's not here either. She's the one that lives in Arkansas.
Okay, so Ms. Johnson's the only representative here, from those four.
Are there any more of the changes to the plan that were requested to hear? I know we've heard the one from Brett Snyder.
Oh, yes.
So
we
we
have-
have
we have
more.
Do we need to make a motion out to make that change? Or we need to get them all here from everything and do it?
We've got to finish all the public hearing first, and then we'll make.
Okay.
Okay, we'll make a note on that one. So the note
Okay.
is that the planning commission would like to approve that mixed use to proceed forward
Yes.
for the board of trustees for final approval.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
I have a note.
maybe one other way of putting that is, as we're collecting the potential recommendation of the planning commission, the planning commission wants to incorporate making these changes as part of that recommendation. Is that accurate?
Do we want to make even those properties that are within those? If people want to have theirs, they can request it. If you own property, say between those, then they could request to be joined with that if they wanted to, or stay out of it.
They can always, after any of this is set, there can always be a request for rezoning application submitted to the town, and we can facilitate a rezone. This is not the only opportunity to change zoning on your parcels whatsoever.
Right.
And that rezoning process is done by the board.
It's actually before the planning.
Oh, it goes to the
and
planning
then-
commission and the board.
That's
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we've captured